January 1942, Western Pacific, early morning. The sea is calm but heavy with moisture. Low clouds sit close to the water. Visibility stretches for miles, then suddenly closes. Japanese reconnaissance aircraft move steadily above the surface. Their engines hum with confidence. Below them, American convoys crawl forward. Cargo ships, oilers, transports. Long lines of steel moving at predictable speed. From the air, the scene looks familiar. Exposed, slow, vulnerable. Japanese pilots circle and observe. They report little resistance. No carriers in sight. No heavy escort formations. Just merchant hulls cutting white lines through dark water. For months, this pattern has repeated across the Pacific. American supply routes appear thin and poorly guarded. Japanese naval air power has learned to trust what it sees. The pilots joke in brief radio exchanges. Targets like these rarely fight back. But the weather begins to change. Fog rolls in from the horizon, thick, uneven. It erases the edge of the sea. Shapes dissolve. The surface becomes flat and empty. The aircraft continue their sweep, unaware that beyond the fog, engines are already turning, radios are silent, and steel decks are alive with motion. What these pilots cannot see belongs to a larger story that began long before this morning. By early 1942, the balance of power in the Pacific appeared settled, at least on the surface. In the weeks following Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Navy had executed one of the most rapid expansions in naval history. Hong Kong fell in December 1941. Wake Island followed. Guam, the Philippines. Singapore collapsed in February. Japanese forces now controlled vast stretches of ocean and coastline. Their carrier groups moved with confidence. Their pilots carried combat experience unmatched by any other naval air arm in the world. Japanese naval doctrine had been built around decisive battle, carrier aviation, long-range strikes, aggressive reconnaissance. Early success seemed to confirm every assumption. Enemy fleets were found, hit hard, finished quickly. What remained of American naval power withdrew eastward, damaged and scattered. Yet war is sustained not by victories alone, but by logistics. Across the Pacific, the United States faced a problem measured not in ships of war, but in distance, fuel, food, aircraft parts, ammunition. Entire armies depended on long supply lines stretching thousands of miles across open ocean. Convoys became lifelines. Slow-moving cargo ships carried the material weight of the war. Without them, aircraft would not fly. Ships would not sail. Bases would starve. To Japanese aviators, these convoys looked like easy prey. Early patrol reports consistently described weak escort screens. A handful of destroyers, occasional cruisers, rare air cover. In the opening months of the war, this assessment was largely accurate. The U.S. Navy had lost battleships. Carrier strength was limited. Many escort vessels were committed elsewhere. Anti-submarine warfare remained underdeveloped. Japanese pilots flying from land bases and carriers encountered American shipping again and again. The results reinforced confidence. Convoys were spotted from altitude, shadowed, struck. Bombs fell into clustered hulls. Fires spread. Ships slowed and fell behind. Losses mounted. Geography amplified the problem. The Pacific offered few choke points. Vast distances reduced reaction time. Fog, rain squalls, and cloud cover could hide movement for hours. Reconnaissance relied heavily on visual confirmation. Radar existed, but its use in Japanese aviation was limited and inconsistent. Within Japanese command circles, a belief took hold. American convoys could be managed through air superiority alone. Strike aircraft would find them, destroy them. No need to commit major fleet units. Carriers were preserved for decisive engagements. Battleships remained concentrated for a final confrontation that would end the war on Japanese terms. What Japanese intelligence saw seemed to support this view. Convoys continued to appear isolated. Escorts remained light. No obvious counterpattern emerged. Each report reinforced the last. But behind this visible picture, American naval planners were learning, quietly, methodically. They studied losses. They tracked enemy flight patterns. They understood that what appeared weak was often transitional. The Pacific was not empty, it was layered. And beneath the surface of early defeats, a different response was taking shape. While Japanese pilots reported success from the air, the American response was forming far from the flight paths they observed. In shipyards, training grounds, and command rooms, the United States Navy was changing how it fought at sea. The process was slow, often invisible, but it was deliberate. American industrial capacity shifted into full motion by early 1942. Shipbuilding accelerated at a scale never seen before. Destroyers, escort carriers, radar-equipped cruisers. Hulls left the yards faster than crews could be trained to man them. This expansion did not produce immediate strength at the front. It produced depth, reserves, options. More important than numbers was doctrine. American commanders accepted that convoys could not survive on surface escorts alone. Air power would decide survival. But not the kind Japanese pilots expected. Instead of exposing carriers near shipping lanes, the U.S. Navy adopted dispersion. Task forces were broken into smaller, flexible groups. Carriers operated at distance, often out of sight, sometimes beyond the horizon. Aircraft were held back. Radios stayed silent. Radar changed the equation. Early sets were crude, short range, unreliable at times, but they offered something visual. Scouting could not. Detection through fog, through rain, through darkness. Operators learned to read faint signals. Commanders learned to trust unseen contacts. Japanese intelligence did not fully account for this shift. Reconnaissance doctrine remained visually focused. Pilots looked for ships. They counted hulls. They assessed formations. What they did not see was treated as absence. Fog became reassurance rather than warning. American convoy routes were altered. Timetables changed. Escorts rotated. Some convoys were intentionally exposed to draw attention. Others moved under cover of weather. Fleet elements shadowed these movements from a distance, waiting for confirmation rather than revealing presence. Leadership adapted as well. Officers who survived early defeats understood the cost of predictability. They emphasized uncertainty, deception, silence. Orders stressed restraint. Let the enemy see what he expects. Hide what matters. By mid-1942, a gap had opened between perception and reality. Japanese pilots continued to report familiar patterns. American convoys still appeared slow, still looked vulnerable, still moved across open water. But the space around them was no longer empty. Somewhere beyond the fog line, engines turned at low speed. Flight decks were cleared. Crews waited without orders, spoken aloud. Steel waited for a signal that would come too late to be undone. That moment would be shaped not by what was seen, but by what was missed. The first angle is human. Japanese reconnaissance pilots flew long hours over open ocean. Many were veterans. China, early Pacific strikes. They trusted their eyes because their eyes had never failed them. From altitude, a convoy told a story. Speed, spacing. Escort count. They learned to read intention from formation alone. When they saw slow ships with thin screens, they felt control. The sky belonged to them. Below, American sailors felt the opposite. Merchant crews sailed knowing they were targets. They watched the horizon. They learned the sound of aircraft engines by heart. Escort crews worked without pause. Radar watches, depth charge drills. Sleep came in fragments. The second angle is tactical. Japanese doctrine emphasized forward reconnaissance and rapid strike. Find the enemy. Hit first, hit hard. It worked best when the enemy reacted predictably. American convoys no longer did. Escorts altered spacing. Ships zigzagged irregularly. Air cover appeared briefly, then vanished. Some convoys accepted exposure to protect others. Tactics became layered. Visible weakness concealed deeper strength. The third angle is technological. Fog was not just weather. It was a tool. Radar allowed American ships to see through it. Japanese aircraft could not. Radio silence protected fleet locations. Signal discipline tightened. Aircraft were launched late, not early. Detection became asymmetric. One side saw, the other assumed. Each of these angles moved independently. Human confidence, tactical habit, technological mismatch. Together they narrowed the margin for error. As these forces converged, the distance between assumption and reality continued to shrink. The fourth angle is leadership. Japanese naval command operated from a position of early success. Admirals trusted the system that had delivered victory after victory. Carrier air power had shattered fleets and opened sea lanes. Reconnaissance reports confirmed expectations. Convoys appeared weak, escorts appeared insufficient. Leadership decisions followed the information provided. Carriers were conserved. Heavy units were held back. Risk was managed by distance. American leadership worked from failure. Early losses forced change. Commanders learned caution. They delegated authority. Task force commanders were given latitude to act without direct oversight. Silence was encouraged. Initiative was rewarded. Fleet commanders accepted temporary vulnerability in exchange for long-term advantage. The fifth angle is enemy perception. Japanese pilots saw what they expected to see. A known pattern repeated often enough to feel permanent. Each successful report reinforced belief. American weakness became an assumption rather than a condition. When fog concealed the horizon, absence confirmed comfort. No ships meant no threat. American commanders depended on this expectation. They counted on misjudgment. Convoys became bait without appearing so. Fleet units moved slowly. Aircraft remained grounded. The enemy was allowed to underestimate without interference. The sixth angle is psychological. Confidence dulls caution. Fatigue sharpens it. Japanese aviators flew routine patrols. Familiar skies, familiar targets. American sailors lived with constant uncertainty. They expected attack at any moment. That tension hardened discipline. Silence was obeyed. Orders were followed without question. By the time these angles aligned, both sides were committed to their interpretations. One trusted sight, the other trusted preparation. The space between them narrowed into a single morning. A line of fog, and a moment when reality would replace assumption. The morning remains gray. Fog presses low against the sea. It moves in bands, opening and closing sightlines without pattern. Japanese reconnaissance aircraft continue their patrol at medium altitude. Their reports remain consistent. Convoys ahead. Light escort. No capital ships detected. Below the fog line, the situation is different. American radar operators track contacts moving overhead. Blips appear and fade. Bearings are plotted by hand. Range estimates are whispered. No transmissions leave the ships. Flight decks remain quiet. Aircraft crews wait beside their machines. Engines are warmed only when ordered. Time compresses. Shortly after mid-morning, the fog begins to thin in places. Not enough to reveal the horizon, just enough to expose fragments. A mast, a wake. The edge of a deck, then the pattern breaks. Japanese pilots bank to investigate what looks like a shadow where no shadow should be. The shape does not match a merchant hull. It moves too fast. Its wake is wrong. A second aircraft confirms it. Then a third. Reports sharpen. Warship silhouettes emerge. Not escorts. Larger. Organized. Moments later, the fog opens again. An American task force comes into view. Carriers, cruisers, destroyers deployed in depth. Aircraft already turning into the wind. Deck crews in motion. What had been hidden by distance and weather is suddenly undeniable. Japanese pilots transmit urgently. New contacts, multiple heavy units, aircraft carriers present, but the advantage of surprise has already shifted. American fighters lift off in coordinated launches. Strike aircraft follow in disciplined intervals. The sky fills with motion that was absent minutes before. Anti-aircraft batteries come alive. Radar tracks tighten. Orders are issued calmly, without haste. For the first time since the war began, Japanese airmen realize they are not observing prey. They are inside a trap that has already closed. The first American fighters climb hard into the low cloud ceiling. They do not scatter. They rise in disciplined formations. Controllers vector them using radar bearings fed directly from plotting rooms below deck. Japanese reconnaissance aircraft attempt to widen distance, but altitude and weather limit options. The fog that once concealed now traps. Within minutes, contact turns violent. American fighters reach the Japanese planes first. Short bursts, tight turns. One reconnaissance aircraft spirals down, disappearing into the cloud layer. Another breaks away, transmitting partial warnings that arrive too late to change anything. The sky becomes fragmented. Visibility shifts by seconds. Engagements begin and end without warning. Below, American strike aircraft form up. Torpedo bombers fly low, skimming the fog line. Dive bombers climb through breaks in the cloud, using altitude gained under concealment. The carriers maintain steady course. Deck crews work without shouting. Procedures drilled for months unfold exactly as planned. Japanese command receives conflicting reports. Some aircraft describe carriers. Others report heavy escorts only. The picture remains incomplete. Orders hesitate. No immediate counterstrike forms. The window for initiative narrows rapidly. When Japanese aircraft finally appear in strength, they arrive piecemeal. Small groups. Disorganized. Lacking coordination. American fighters meet them well forward of the fleet. Engagements favor altitude and numbers. Losses mount before attack. Runs can begin. Anti-aircraft fire thickens near the task force. Radar-guided guns adjust quickly. Bursts bracket incoming planes. Several attackers release early. Torpedoes run wide. Bombs fall short or long. American strike aircraft reach their targets soon after. They attack enemy support vessels and forward elements exposed by their own reconnaissance effort. Hits are confirmed. Fires break out. Formations scatter. Command cohesion degrades. By early afternoon, the battle is decided in pattern, if not yet in numbers. Japanese air strength withdraws to reassess. Fuel runs low. Losses are clear. American ships remain operational. Carriers continue flight operations without interruption. The fog begins to lift completely. What remains is wreckage, oil slicks, scattered debris. Silence broken only by engines returning to deck and the steady movement of ships resuming course. The moment that began with mockery ends with calculation. One side has learned something permanent. The sea absorbs the lesson without ceremony. The immediate results emerge slowly. Reports are compiled. Damage is assessed. Aircraft counts are compared against launch records. Japanese losses include reconnaissance planes destroyed in the opening minutes and strike aircraft lost during fragmented attacks. Several air crews fail to return. Fuel shortages force early landings at distant bases. Some aircraft ditch at sea. American losses are limited, a small number of fighters damaged. Minor deck casualties during recovery operations. No capital ships are sunk, no carriers are disabled. Flight operations continue into the evening without interruption. For Japanese command, the shock is not numerical, it is structural. Reconnaissance assumptions collapse. Convoys were not isolated. The absence of visible carriers did not mean absence of force. Fog did not protect. It concealed danger. Reports from surviving pilots describe radar-guided fighters and coordinated launches beyond anything previously encountered. American commanders analyzed the engagement in parallel. The plan worked. Silence held. Radar provided early warning. Weather masked movement. Discipline prevented premature exposure. The convoy remained intact. The fleet remained hidden until the moment mattered. Strategically, the impact spreads quickly. Japanese air units revise patrol procedures. Requests for stronger escort and earlier strike authorization increase. Commanders become cautious. Reconnaissance flights grow heavier and more defensive. Confidence erodes. American crews absorb the outcome quietly. There is no celebration, only confirmation. The war can be fought differently now. The enemy can be misled. Surprise can be regained. The Pacific does not change overnight, but something fundamental has shifted. The fog clears from the water. It does not clear from memory. In the weeks that follow, the engagement reshapes behavior on both sides. Japanese naval aviation adjusts patrol depth and frequency. Reconnaissance aircraft fly higher and in greater numbers. Escort fighters are assigned where possible. Reports grow longer and more cautious. The certainty that once defined early Pacific operations fades. Commanders demand confirmation before committing forces. Carriers are repositioned with greater care. Fuel planning becomes more conservative. Doctrine begins to shift. Visual scouting alone is no longer trusted. Discussions emerge around radar adoption and improved coordination between air and surface units. These changes take time. Training, equipment, institutional resistance slows progress. The gap that opened in this battle does not close quickly. For the United States Navy, the lesson reinforces a new way of fighting. Convoys remain exposed by necessity, but never alone. Hidden coverage becomes standard. Carriers operate at distance. Radar pickets extend awareness beyond sight. Silence becomes a weapon equal to firepower. Psychologically, the effect runs deep. American sailors carry a quiet confidence forward. They have seen that preparation works, that patience matters, that the enemy can be drawn into error without forcing contact. Japanese pilots carry doubt. They question what lies beyond the horizon. They look twice where once they looked once. Historians later note this pattern repeating across the Pacific. Encounters shaped not by overwhelming force, but by withheld force. Battles decided before the first shot by who understood what could not be seen. The sea resumes its rhythm. Convoys move on. Patrols continue. War presses forward. But the fog, once trusted, is no longer comfort. It is suspicion. This moment at sea did not end a campaign. It did not decide the war. Its importance lies elsewhere. It revealed a shift in how naval war would be fought, not through constant visibility, but through managed absence. Not through constant attack, but through restraint. The Americans learned that strength did not need to announce itself. It only needed to be ready. For Japanese naval aviation, the encounter exposed a limit that skill alone could not overcome. Experience mattered. Courage mattered. But perception mattered more. A system built on what could be seen struggled when the enemy learned how to disappear. Confidence once earned became a liability when it hardened into expectation. Technology played its quiet role. Radar did not fire a shot. It did not sink a ship. But it changed time. It gave minutes where there were none before. It allowed decisions to form while the enemy still believed nothing was happening. In naval warfare, those minutes were decisive. Human discipline carried the rest. Silence held. Orders were followed. Crews waited when instinct urged action. That patience created surprise. Surprise created control. The fog itself remains the most honest symbol. It did not favor one side by chance. It favored the side that planned for uncertainty. One side saw emptiness and relaxed. The other saw opportunity and prepared. In the years that followed, the Pacific War would grow louder. Larger fleets, bigger battles, names that would enter history books. But many outcomes would trace back to lessons learned in quieter encounters like this one. War does not always turn on explosions. Sometimes it turns on what is withheld, on what is hidden, on what is allowed to be misunderstood. Out on the Pacific, convoys continued to move, pilots continued to fly, ships continued to vanish into weather. But after this morning, the fog no longer meant safety. It meant possibility.